And I just don't understand how you can sit there and say, I mean, look, you are entirely missing the point here.
I am really not missing the point. You're just...
No, you are. The man spent 11 years of intense, grueling apprenticeship, working his way up the Hollywood ladder, absorbing the actual mechanics of filmmaking to deliver what is, frankly, a properly genius piece of cinema, and you are just waving it away like it's absolutely nothing.
Wait, hold on a second. I am not waving away the 11 years of apprenticeship. I am saying those 11 years are entirely irrelevant if the end result of all that technical learning is just a massive ego trip.
An ego trip? Are you joking?
Oh, I'm completely serious. You are completely blinded by the aesthetics of it all. He was a madman with a megaphone, pacing around a soundstage, making his crew and his actors thoroughly miserable, just so he could get a pretty shadow on a bloody wall.
It is not just a pretty shadow. Look, what you are dismissing as an ego trip is literally the grammar of the American gangster film.
Oh, grammar. Wait.
Yes, grammar. He built the visual foundation of an entire genre out of thin air.
Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1. 1913 to 1950.
To you listening to this right now, welcome to the chaos.
Yeah, welcome.
We really need you to settle this today because we are getting absolutely nowhere. Grab a drink, pull up a chair, and get ready because we are not doing polite, sterile summaries today. We are locked in a proper dispute here.
A completely intractable deadlock, really.
Exactly. I have this massive stack of historical texts on the table between us, contemporary reviews, studio memos, and specifically our main point of contention today, the foundational text cinema, the magic vehicle, and we need you to act as the jury.
Right, because my esteemed colleague here is currently worshiping at the altar of a director who cared infinitely more about where a prop feather landed in a shaft of light than whether his own narrative structure made a lick of sense.
I am worshiping at the altar of Josef von Sternberg, an absolute visionary. And the subject of this entire chaotic dissection is his 1927 silent film, Underworld. It is 2,329 meters of film that sparked a pure cinematic revolution.
2039 meters of half-brilliant, half-nonsense bloated melodrama. You can't be serious calling it a revolution.
I am dead serious. Look, before Underworld, the gangster genre, as we film buffs know, it just did not exist in this form.
Well,
no, hear me out. You had crime films, sure, but Sternberg took the raw, gritty pulp of 1920s gangland culture and elevated it into high art. He essentially invented the visual language that every single crime film uses today, from the heavy use of shadow to the psychological isolation of the anti-hero.
Right. He took a brilliant script, a script handed to him by the Hollywood machine, mind you, and threw a bunch of fluorescent fog over it to disguise the fact that he was a raging narcissist.
That's rubbish, mate.
It is a classic style over substance con. And this film is exactly where that particular cinematic rot started. We are going to tear into the actual history today, the studio politics, the technical credits, the psychology of his lighting, and the absolute shambles of his early career. Because this film is massively overhyped by historians who forgive bad storytelling if the cinematography is pretty.
That is utterly ridiculous. If we are going to do this properly, we have to look at who Sternberg actually was, because you keep throwing the word narcissist around while completely ignoring the unbelievable grind he went through.
I acknowledge the grind. I just don't think it matters.
It matters entirely. Let's talk about the context of the 1910s and early 1920s film industry. It was the Wild West. You didn't just walk into a studio with a film degree back then, because they didn't exist. He was born in Vienna, came to America, and spent 11 patient years learning every single technical aspect of the trade.
Right, film patching.
Film patching, editing, operating the rudimentary cameras.
Yes, he learned the mechanics. I don't deny his technical proficiency.
He mastered them, and when he finally got his shot in 1925, he made his debut, Salvation Hunters. Now, most directors would try to make a safe, bankable picture to secure their career, not Sternberg. He makes an experimental, semi-amateur production shot for absolute pennies, and it was heavily influenced by Kammerspiel.
Ah, yes. Kammerspiel, the masterpiece nobody watched.
But those who watched it understood it. Let's actually unpack Kammerspiel for a second, because it's crucial.
Yeah.
The German intimate theater movement in an era where American silent film acting was still heavily reliant on grand pantomime gestures.
Flailing arms, exaggerated gasps to the back row.
Exactly. Kammerspiel did the exact opposite. It stripped away the theatricality. It focused intimately on the psychological reality of the characters through micro-expressions, atmosphere, and naturalism.
Right.
And Sternberg brought that European sensibility to a cheap American indie. He stripped away the grand sets. He believed it was the only work in his entire career that bore his true directorial credo. It was raw, uncompromised, and it forced critics like Charlie Chaplin to actually pay attention. It proves he had this deeply rooted, spot-on artistic vision from day one.
Wait. I am going to stop you right there.
What?
Let's look at this logically. If he had this perfectly formed, uncompromised genius, then explain the next 2 years to me. Go on. Explain what happened immediately after Salvation Hunters when the studios actually gave him money.
Well, he took on a couple of other projects that, well, they clashed with his sensibilities.
Clash? Oh, you were too kind. They were complete disasters, a complete shambles. He took on these scripts, including a film Chaplin himself produced for him, A Woman of the Sea, and he botched them so badly they were either completely suppressed or heavily recut. No, listen.
Yeah.
Why did they fail? Because Salvation Hunters was a fluke of low-budget necessity.
Yeah.
The moment he was handed actual responsibility and a real budget, he proved he didn't know how to pick a script, let alone structure a coherent narrative without adult supervision.
That is completely unfair to how the studio system operated. I actually struggle to understand how you can blame him for that.
Yeah.
How did contracts even work for a new director back then? He was pushed into taking inappropriate scripts by a studio system that didn't understand his rhythm.
And the rhythm.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like a brilliant, erratic indie band signing to a major label. They make this incredible, raw, self-produced debut album in their garage. Then the major label signs them, throws them into a pristine studio with, I don't know, pop songwriters, and demands a radio hit. Of course it fails. They need the right producer to channel their specific genius into something digestible.
That analogy is so fundamentally flawed, I don't even know where to start.
How is it flawed?
It wasn't the studio forcing pop songs on him. It was Sternberg's own arrogance. He genuinely believed he could elevate any old dross just by pointing a camera at it and lighting it well. He wasn't some misunderstood indie darling suffering under the corporate boot. He was a guy who wasted thousands of dollars of studio money. He was entirely reliant on the Hollywood machine to bail him out of his own pretension.
But the machine did tolerate him. That is what is so fascinating about the 1920s studio system. What does it say about Hollywood back then that a director can fail twice spectacularly and still be handed a massive prestige project like Underworld?
It says they were desperate.
No. Today, if a director drops 2 massive flops, they are put in director jail for a decade. They are directing toothpaste commercials. But back then, executives like Benjamin Percival Schulberg at famous Players Lasky, which of course becomes Paramount, he recognized that true artistic vision requires a bit of risk. Schulberg saw the genius in Sternberg's failures.
I think you are severely romanticizing Schulberg's motives there. Schulberg wasn't a patron of the arts. He was a businessman. The studio heads were desperate for fresh crime pictures because the public was eating up the real-life gangster headlines.
Right, but he chose Sternberg.
Because they owned Sternberg under contract. They were paying him anyway. And Schulberg figured he had a foolproof script that even this pretentious Austrian couldn't ruin. Let's be very clear about why Underworld works as a film. It isn't because Sternberg is an auteur genius. It's because he was handed a bulletproof vest woven by actual storytelling masters.
Okay, let's unpack this supposed bulletproof vest. You are talking about the writers.
I am heavily talking about the writers. Because since Sternberg clearly couldn't structure a hit himself, we have to look at the people who gave this film its spine. The original story, the actual foundation of the whole thing, was written by Ben Hecht.
Right.
We all know Hecht, right? A legendary Chicago journalist. The man didn't just write fiction. He lived in the trenches of Chicago during the height of Prohibition. He knew the criminal underworld. He knew the vernacular, the psychology of the mobsters, the corrupt politicians. He brought a terrifying, grounded realism to the treatment.
Sure, he wrote a good treatment.
And then the script was adapted by Robert N. Lee and Charles Furstman to fit the screen. And crucially, the title cards, which in a silent film serve as both dialogue and narrative pacing. They were written by George Marion Jr. These are the people who saved Sternberg's career by giving him a structure he couldn't break.
I am not denying the talent of Ben Hecht or George Marion Jr., obviously, but to say they saved his career willfully diminishes what a director actually does. A script is just a blueprint.
A blueprint he desperately needed.
But fine, let's look at the anatomy of the story they gave him, because I still maintain it is Sternberg's faultless composition and psychological understanding of the actors that makes it a masterpiece. We don't need to do a beat-by-beat plot summary, but let's look at the inciting character dynamics.
Because the character dynamics are where your genius argument really starts to show its cracks. The film follows Bullweed, played by George Bancroft. He's a brutal, thuggish kingpin. He robs banks, he kills people. But we're supposed to believe he's secretly this kind-hearted, sentimental giant.
He's complex. Look at the opening sequence. He pulls off a bank heist, and amidst the chaos and the adrenaline, he pauses to give a chunk of the stolen money to a beggar on the street before speeding off. That is a brilliant psychological contradiction. It shows he operates on his own twisted moral code.
Oh, please. It is the cheapest trick in manipulative screenwriting. It's the save the cat formula, decades before the book was even written.
It's effective storytelling.
It's a lazy way to force an audience to empathize with a violent criminal. Oh, he just blew up a bank, but look, he gave a beggar a tenner. What a deeply tortured soul. It's unearned. Anyway, Bull takes in a drunken, washed-up former lawyer named Rolls-Royce Wenzel, played by Clive Brook. Rolls-Royce becomes the brains of Bull's criminal empire.
And it becomes a classic rise-to-power arc. But the entire thing pivots on the annual Underworld ball. Bull's rival, a vicious gangster named Buck Mulligan, attacks Bull's girlfriend, Feathers McCoy.
Let's just pause to appreciate the name Feathers McCoy, played by Evelyn Brent. Real subtle writing there from the great Ben Hecht.
It is evocative of the era. It works. So Mulligan attacks Feathers, and Bull, operating on that exact same twisted moral code we saw with the beggar, murders Mulligan in a rage to protect her. Bull gets arrested, goes to trial, and is sentenced to hang.
Right.
This is where the psychological study really tightens the screws. While Bull is rotting in a cell, Feathers and Rolls-Royce, who have been harboring this intense, unspoken attraction to each other, finally admit their feelings.
But they are so incredibly painfully noble about it. They refuse to consummate their love or run away because of their immense loyalty to the murderous bank robber sitting on death row.
It is the central tragedy of the film. They try to organize a massive prison break for Bull just hours before he is scheduled to be executed, but the plan completely misfires. Bull, sitting in a cell, hears the plan fail and immediately, because of his paranoid nature, assumes that Rolls-Royce and Feathers deliberately botched the escape to get rid of him so they can be together.
Right, and then Bull, fueled by superhuman jealousy, manages to escape entirely on his own and flees to his secret hideout. And this right here is where we get the most contrived, bafflingly stupid piece of writing in the entire film.
Oh, here we go.
Feathers, utterly unaware that Bull has escaped and wants to murder her for treason, casually wanders over to the secret hideout to grab some things and accidentally leads the entire Chicago police force right to the doorstep.
It is Greek tragedy. It is fate closing in on them.
It is bloody convenient writing is what it is. It's a lazy way to force a third act climax. Oops, I accidentally walked 100 armed cops to our super secret, highly illegal lair. Are you joking? It completely undermines any realism Ben Hecht supposedly brought to the project.
But look at what it sets up. It sets up the most magnificent siege sequence in early cinema. Bull is barricaded inside this dusty apartment. The police are outside with machine guns. And then Rolls-Royce, risking his own life, navigates a secret passage to get inside the hideout. Bull is standing there, gun in hand, ready to execute them both.
Right. The standoff.
But when he sees that they risked certain death just to come back to him, his entire worldview shatters. He realizes their loyalty is real. He sees that they truly love each other, and in a moment of profound grace, he tells them to use the secret passage to escape. He sacrifices himself, surrenders to the cops, and goes to the gallows a redeemed man. It is a faultlessly composed psychological study of a man destroyed by his own aggression and redeemed by grace.
I am looking at you across this table right now, and I am genuinely gobsmacked that you buy into that. A faultlessly composed psychological study. It is standard, run-of-the-mill melodrama. It is a dime store romance novel wrapped in a gangster trench coat. The love triangle completely hijacks the film and acts as a massive distraction from the fact that it has absolutely zero sociological depth, regarding actual crime.
It's not meant to be a documentary about the Chicago mob. It's about the human soul under pressure.
But look at the films that came just 3 or 4 years later. Look at Little Caesar or The Public Enemy. Those films actually bothered to examine the sociology of crime, the organizational structure of the mafia, the brutal reality of the American dream gone toxic during the Depression. Underworld doesn't care about any of that.
It cares about the characters.
It cares about star-crossed lovers making goody eyes at each other while a thug looks sad in the corner. I ask you, put yourself in Feather's shoes for a second. Caught between a violent, possessive kingpin and a brilliant, sobered-up lawyer, would you stay out of a sense of honor? You wouldn't. You'd run a mile. But the script forces them into this ridiculous noble standoff to wring tears out of the audience.
Would I stay? Listen, you, the listener, do you reckon you'd stay quiet if you were in Feather's shoes? In the 1920s Underworld, if you cross a man like Bullweed, you end up in a barrel at the bottom of the Chicago River. She stays because she is terrified, and she stays because she feels a profound debt to the man who gave her a life when she had nothing. It is incredibly complex psychology, but you are just refusing to see the nuance because you're so utterly obsessed with dismissing Sternberg as a hack.
I am not calling him a hack. He clearly knew how to operate a camera. I am calling him a man who took a thoroughly average, overly sentimental plot by Ben Hecht and decided the only way to make it interesting was to distract the audience with pretty pictures.
Pretty pictures.
Yes, pretty pictures. And that brings us exactly to the visual style. Because if you want to defend the plot, we'll be here all day. Let's talk about the one thing historians universally praise this film for.
Gladly, because if you want to dismiss the narrative, fine, but let's talk about what makes cinema a distinct art form from theater or literature. Sternberg was primarily a psychologist of the visual. He didn't just point a camera and shoot a play, he created literal moving paintings. We have to talk about his use of expressionist chiaroscuro.
All right, let's get into the weeds on that. He had Burt Glennon as his cinematographer and Hans Dreyer as his art director. Two absolute titans of early Hollywood. And yes, I will concede, the film looks remarkable.
It looks completely revolutionary. For those listening who might not be familiar with the exact mechanics of 1920s lighting achieving chiaroscuro, that intense, high-contrast interplay between deep, crushing black shadows and piercing white light was incredibly difficult. Film stock back then, the orthochromatic and early panchromatic silver nitrate stocks were notoriously slow.
Very slow.
They needed massive amounts of light just to expose an image. So to get these deep shadows, Glennon and Sternberg were using massive carbon arc lamps. These things sputtered, they smoked, they emitted a harsh, blinding glare. And Sternberg was meticulously blocking his actors to stand on the exact millimeter of the set where a shard of light from an arc lamp would slice across their eyes, while the rest of their face fell into complete darkness.
He was using frame composition to tell the story that George Marion Jr.'s title cards didn't need to.
Yes, he was a master of lighting, but you have to ask yourself...
Now, let me finish this point, because the imagery is astonishing. Think about the fluorescent fog rolling through the streets in the opening scenes, making the city look like this spectral, haunted purgatory. Or that specific shot in the climax, when Bull is barricaded in his dusty, squalid apartment. The police are firing machine guns, the wood is splintering, and these sharp, piercing rays of sunlight steal through the cracks in the boards. It's literally illuminating his downfall.
Right, the lighting is dramatic. And the feathers. Feathers, McCoy's namesake boa, gets shredded by bullets, and these white feathers float slowly through the air in this shabby, violent room. It adds this desperate poetry to a scene of absolute carnage.
Desperate poetry. Listen to yourself.
Yeah.
You have swallowed the studio brochure whole. Look, I'm not denying the technical skill. It is visually striking. The physics of achieving that exposure with carbon arc lamps is impressive. But you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of the visual? Is it serving the story, or is the story just an excuse for the visual?
It is elevating the story.
Is it? Billy Wilder, one of the greatest directors and writers to ever live, a man who understood narrative perfection, he said it best. He was observing Sternberg, and he said, and I quote, Sternberg was at heart interested only in photography and considered the plots to be of secondary importance.
So what? Seriously, so what if he prioritized the visual? Cinema is fundamentally a visual medium. If you want a great plot without pictures, go read a book.
I'll tell you so what. When a director thinks the plot is secondary, he isn't telling a story anymore. He is just taking incredibly expensive photographs, and we are still suffering from this exact same disease today. Look at modern cinema. A director gets handed a $200 million budget, and they give you 3 hours of hyper-stylized CGI, glowing skies, meticulously color-graded slow-motion explosions, but the characters are made of cardboard and the plot is Swiss cheese. It's a classic style over substance con, and Sternberg invented it. He used the rapid flow of the edit to mask the fact that the structural foundations of the film were crumbling.
But the edit is brilliant. That rapid flow you're dismissing is exactly why the film works. Sternberg was a massive student of D.W. Griffith. He understood that you don't just use editing to change locations, you use it to control time and emotion. Look at the raid on the jeweler's shop early in the film. It is crisp, it is fast, he cuts on action perfectly. It is like the rhythm of a heartbeat, designed to physically affect the audience's pulse. He isn't masking bad story. He's using spatial geography and pacing to turn a standard gangster tale into a visceral, transcendent experience. He completely changed how film language operated.
He changed how lighting operated. That is it. And to prove my point, I think it's time we bring out the heavy artillery. Let's talk about the book sitting between us.
Oh, here we go. The book brawl. Bring it on.
We've both been poring over the exact same source material for this debate. Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, Journey 1, 1913-1950. For those listening, this is widely considered an absolute foundational text for understanding this era of film history.
And it is spot on. Look, the historical research in cinema, the Magic Vehicle, entirely backs my side of the argument here. The authors explicitly argue that Sternberg was trying to build a completely new visual language. They literally call it a monumental achievement for a reason. They recognize that he was fusing European expressionism with the grit of American crime because he had the stones to try something nobody else dared. He gave birth to an entire cinematic genre.
I reckon the book is being way too kind to him, to be honest.
Oh, so now you are arguing with the definitive historical text.
I am. Because historians have a terrible habit of romanticizing bad behavior and narrative sloppiness just because a film is old and it introduced a new camera technique. You call it ambition. The book calls it a monumental achievement. I call it a massive ego trip. Just because a director spends a fortune, ignores his writer, and makes everyone miserable on set does not make him a genius. He was a proper narcissist with a camera. And I think the book lets him off the hook because Underworld got labeled a classic somewhere in the 1950s by French critics, and nobody's dared to question it since.
That is complete nonsense. It is not an ego trip, it is an evolution. You can literally trace the DNA of every Martin Scorsese film, every Francis Ford Coppola film, straight back to this exact movie. The book gives you the actual credits, the technical breakthroughs, the specific camera techniques that changed how every film is made today. If you find the scale of it a bit of a slog, or if you think the love triangle is a bit melodramatic, that is on you, not the history.
I'm just saying, I am looking at it with a modern eye, and it is half brilliant and half nonsense. The book defends him through a very specific historical lens, but I'm sitting here watching Feathers inexplicably lead the cops to the hideout thinking, mate, cut 30 minutes out of that scene, fix the glaring logic holes in the script, and we'd actually have a compelling story. It is bloated.
It is not bloated. Look, page 131, sorry. Page 131 explicitly says that his use of space and editing creates a rapid flow that pushes the narrative forward. It literally contradicts your argument about it being bloated.
It also says on that exact same page that the rapid flow masks the problems stemming from his approach. The book admits there are problems. It explicitly says he relies on standard melodrama. You are cherry-picking the compliments about lighting and ignoring the glaring structural warnings that the authors put right in front of you.
I am not cherry-picking. I am saying that the visuals are so profound that they render standard narrative critiques irrelevant. It is like criticizing a Picasso painting because the eyes aren't in the anatomically correct place. The distortion is the entire point.
No, it is like praising a chef for putting 24-karat gold leaf on a severely burnt steak. It looks incredibly expensive. It photographs beautifully for the restaurant's menu. But when you actually sit down and chew on it, it tastes like ash. And if you want definitive proof that I am right about this, that his style over substance approach was a fatal flaw, we don't even have to look at modern cinema. We just have to look at what happened to Sternberg himself.
Oh, I knew you were going to bring up the later years.
I am absolutely going to bring up his downfall, because the momentum of this historical text and the very trajectory of his life proves my ultimate point. Sternberg's obsession with style eventually ruined him.
He wasn't ruined, he was misunderstood by an industry that became increasingly obsessed with dialogue after the advent of sound.
He was ruined by his own hubris. Let's look at the case study. Let's jump forward a few years from Underworld to 1934. The Scarlet Empress.
A masterpiece of the visual Baroque.
The completely unwatchable disaster. And what is so fascinating for us analyzing it today is that the ingredients are exactly the same. He uses the exact same cinematographer, Burt Glennon. He uses Hans Dreyer for art direction. But this time, because Underworld and his early Marlene Dietrich films were hits, nobody at Paramount dared to tell him no. He was handed a blank check. And what did he do with zero studio friction? He plumbed the absolute suffocating depths of 1920s Hollywood pretentiousness.
He called it an uncompromising stylistic exercise. He was pushing the boundaries of what the celluloid medium could hold.
An uncompromising stylistic exercise. That is the most pretentious, self-aggrandizing defense of a bad movie I ever heard in my life. This is exactly my point. When you strip away all friction, when an artist faces absolutely zero limitations or studio pushback, their work almost inevitably becomes self-indulgent nonsense. The Scarlet Empress defied not just historical reality, which is bad enough for a film about Catherine the Great, but it defied common sense. The narrative is utterly incoherent. You cannot follow the human emotions of the characters because Sternberg is too busy trying to film them through 50 layers of gauze, massive candelabras, and grotesque statues of gargoyles.
Hear me out. Just hear me out for 1 second. The Scarlet Empress is a sensory overload by design. It is about the madness of the Russian court. The visual baroque, the gargoyles, the suffocating shadows, the extreme clutter of the frame is a physical metaphor for the claustrophobia of absolute power. You are demanding a neat, tidy little historical play, and he is trying to give you a cinematic opera.
I am demanding a story that doesn't make my brain leak out of my ears. It proves that without a grounded story to hold him back, like the one Ben Hecht forced upon him in Underworld, without a tether to reality, Sternberg's so-called genius was just unwatchable pretension. The style ate the substance alive, and it killed his mainstream career.
It didn't kill his career, it just pushed him out of the commercial mainstream. He continued to influence filmmakers for generations. You cannot look at the lighting in 1940s film noir. The shadows slicing through the Venetian blinds, the cigarette smoke swirling in the high contrast light, the existential dread conveyed entirely through lens choices, and not see Sternberg's fingerprints on every single frame. He taught Hollywood how to use light and shadow to convey psychological trauma.
He taught Hollywood that if you make a film look pretty enough, historians and critics will forgive the fact that your lead actress just accidentally walked the entire police force to a secret hideout for no logical reason. He was an arrogant man who got extremely lucky with Ben Hecht's foundational story and spent the rest of his life pretending he willed the masterpiece into existence all by himself.
You are absolutely mental. He is a pioneer. He took the mud and the smog of the real world, the rudimentary cameras of the 1920s, and he painted the Sistine Chapel of the gangster genre.
And you are completely taken in by the con. We are just going to run in circles on this all day.
Right. Well, we've done 40 of these disputes, so you listening know we are never going to reach a neat consensus. We are at a total impasse.
A completely intractable deadlock.
So, if you want to see if my esteemed colleague here is just being a cynical git, or if the book actually has it right and I'm right by the thing, the link is in the description. Do you actually have the spine to read the real history in cinema, the magic vehicle, or are you staying lazy and letting us do all the heavy lifting? Your call.
Exactly. Read the credits for yourself. Look at what Ben Hecht actually contributed to the architecture of the film. But before we sign off, I will leave you with one final thought, something we haven't entirely unpacked today.
Oh, go on then. Drop the bomb.
If Billy Wilder was right, and Sternberg truly cared so little about the plot, and only cared about the photography, does the true authorship of the gangster genre actually belong to the writers? Do we owe our modern crime epics to men like Ben Hecht, the hard-boiled journalists, who actually gave these stunning visuals a spine and a soul? Or are we destined to forever worship the wrong cinematic heroes, bowing down to the directors who just painted over their brilliant words with pretty lights?
That is entirely unfair to the medium of film.
Think about it. Next time you watch a cinematic masterpiece, ask yourself whose masterpiece it really is. The visionary with a camera or the writer with a typewriter?
You are unbelievable. You are literally trying to rewrite auteur theory because you don't like a few floating feathers in a death scene. It's the visual language that makes it cinema. You can't just separate the two and hand the trophy to the writer.
I'm not handing them the trophy. I'm saying they built the bloody stadium.
And Sternberg filled it with magic. You are completely missing the...